dearies! Blue Dragon 5 here.
And Rohith.
You guessed it. We're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Mrs. Doubtfire. That's right, one of the classic Robin Williams films. It's for sure classic, one of the most iconic films. I think we all have the VHS of this one, or I guess the DVD, or I guess for the kiddies out there, like discovering for the first time on the advent of streaming. So I figured, honestly, I was shocked that I had so much trouble finding people to talk about this one because I grew up with this one. This is a biggie. I think it's a very well thought of Robin Williams performance. It's a very well made film, and it's just something I felt deserved. 30 is like a big milestone for it. I figure we should talk about it. One of the perennial kind of like '90s films. It's a staple in there. It's a biggie. So, Rohit, how do you feel about Mrs. Doubtfire turning 30?
Well, I'll be turning 30 in 2025, so I can it is kind of interesting that this movie and I are similar ages. Um, I think it's also uh very much a film of its time. Not, and I say this not in a bad way. I think the fact that like the biggest names of like Robin Williams, Sally Field, and Pierce Brosnan, actors who really were big in the 90s. Um, and like two of the three are still like funny enough or have actively worked and been involved superhero stuff. So it's just interesting watching this and being transported back to a period of time in which Robin Williams was just firing all cylinders. So I think when we discuss more of this movie, there's certainly interesting things to unpack. And I think there's interesting things to take, and I think there's really good things to take away from this movie that still resonate just 30 years later.
Yeah, it's. My experience with this one was the VHS and the reruns on television. For me, it's probably my go-to Chris Columbus film. A lot of people probably cite some of the other ones, particularly around the holidays, but this has always been my go-to. I love it. I love. Here. Let me tell you why I really like it. It's because I feel it blends the comedy and the drama so flawlessly. And I think it's really great when we have comedic actors doing that. I really think it's like some of the best stuff we get when we have like a comedic actor who gets to play a lot of drama within the comedy. It's like it adds like a really even balance, shows a little both sides of the coin there. And it reveals, as we see in this movie so often, there's something really honest in there, and I think that's why the film stood the test of time. It's not going for cheap laughs. We have like really great comedic set pieces, but all the comedy, it's driven by very relatable pathos.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been moved by that with this movie. It's always been like it's everyone's. It's kind of hard not to tell it off because the man was very important to a lot of people. But in Robin Williams, there's like a plethora of really great iconic roles. You could throw a dart and you could throw a dart out a window and you could hit a really good Robin Williams performance.
Yeah.
Turns like an iconic one, like he could rest any laurels or legacies on. Awakenings. You got Good Morning Vietnam. The Patch Ad. Well, some people might disagree on Patch Adams, but you see my point, though. Yeah.
It's like even in the movies that aren't necessarily great or even good, Robin Williams is always the highlight or the best part of any movie he's in.
Yeah. Exactly. You get Dead Poets Society, for example. It's a whole. Here's the thing. Even the movies that were not critically loved not critically loved, I still think there's a lot there. For example, Bicentennial Man. That was also Chris Columbus. He did that one as well. That was in some senses his spiritual follow up to this film.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Bicentennial Man. No one else does, but I like it.
I think I watched it a lot, or I remember watching it a lot growing up because I had the DVD of Bicentennial Man, and that's like a movie I haven't seen in ages. But I think
It
upon
is worth a rewatch. There's one kind of iffy element of the movie, but aside from that, I really think it's got a lot going for it.
Mhm.
Anyway, we have some comments. Code Geass anime fan. Hi, this film is very good. Astute observation, sir. Then we get to Robin Williams was great and everything. Rest in peace, obviously. Patch Adams underrated. Patch Adams. Here's the thing. I enjoy Patch Adams, and I do really like a lot of elements of that film. I mean, look, if you take a step back and you try and pick it apart, like plus when you realize that it was a little off base with how the real guy operated, but as a work of fiction, that's kind of like driven by the spirit of the man. I don't know, there's something kind of nice there. But when you look at like we're holding a mirror up to the system, it's like maybe there's kind of an element there. It's a little could have been stronger in the writing department, but still, the performance that Rob Williams is given for Patch Adams with those constraints, historical accuracy wise, which all biopics have to go up against too. There's always going to be the inaccuracies and like the liberties taken and everything. So it's always a losing battle. You're never going to win that. But anyway, I would say Patch Adams is underrated, but definitely not the top tier Rob Williams performance. Anyway, Little Blue, the very, very, very first time I heard of this film, I thought it was Rob Williams actually playing a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Which does sound really funny. He's just basically playing a woman like there's no father in disguise. It's just like literally Rob Williams playing like the little old lady, which he could do. And a fun fact, I believe this was this had to be way before. Interesting, Rob Williams, he played Andy Kaufman's grandmother in Carnegie Hall, pre Mrs. Doubtfire, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, drifting a little off focus there. Before we really get into the nitty gritty, I'm going to lay out some backgrounds. I kind of do that to kind of celebrate our retrospective kind of element here. I'm going to lay out kind of how this film came into being. There's a few little fun facts, and we're just going to get into them. We'll start wherever you want. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, so apparently, Miss Doubtfire, it was based off, and I had no idea about this. It's an adaptation of a book. Actually, it's an adaptation of this book that was a UK novel written in '87. It's called Madame Doubtfire. And Fox secured the rights for the book and essentially adapted it stateside into a film. And they got Chris Columbus to direct. And this is like Chris Columbus post Home Alone. I believe this is pre Harry Potter. Just to give you an example, he did Adventures in Babysitting was kind of a splash onto the scene. Then you had the Home Alone movies, which basically wrote him a blank check, and then eventually you get Harry Potter. And he did the first two of these franchises, and then they all went to varying degrees. We have Raja Gosnell was the editor on this, the man who watched the Scooby Doo movies. He was the editor on this. You got to start here as an editor. Let's see So the logic on this film was, okay, how do we adapt it stateside? Well, let's take the element of the book here, which is essentially, we're separating father from his children, and he finds an inventive way to be in their lives. Let's really get to the heart of like how divorce is striking families in the 90s, which was a big thing. Like early 90s, divorce was still kind of a, if not a dirty word like it was in the 50s, it was kind of a foreign concept. It was very much like, I don't like the divorce is kind of like it's the end times, man. It's happening, but it's very much like it's a depressing thing. So the goal of this movie was to like, let's show divorce not as the end. It's a huge adjustment, but it's not the end. So that was kind of the mission statement of the film. And Rob Williams, Rob Williams had gone through, his first divorce before this movie. I suspect in some part that's why he went for this. I mean, the other reason probably would have been this is Rob Williams post Aladdin, where he was, very mumuch in demand. Let's see. So the biggest challenge, as you can probably guess, was getting the makeup just right. That's why they waited to shoot all of Mrs. Doubtfire stuff until they waited till the last possible moments for them to actually to get all the details right. Because if this makeup didn't work, the whole movie would sink.
Really, I wouldn't figure I guess maybe this is just me not being knowledgeable about makeup and hair design from films, but I because I know nowadays it's you hear actors talk about how you had to get up really early in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 hours of makeup, which I guess would be the same here. But I never figured that what was it about the makeup that was a challenge to like get right? Was it just like the
Well,
way
here's the thing with any. Oh, sorry, go on.
was it just the way the makeup like interacted with like the lighting or like how long the said makeup would last? Like what is it specifically was a challenge for this movie?
Well, here's what I can speak to is in general in movies with makeup, the main thing that takes the longest time to really get right, and especially for this film, I'd imagine with this film, as with in general with all the reasons makeup just takes so long and everything, and it's such an involved process, and why it's always a worrisome thing, is that how it's going to stand to the close up, like how it's going to stand in close up on the camera. So that's the thing. We have like really we need to be able to. We can't have the family turn into idiots. We're like, okay, it's clearly Robin Williams just like made like with like plastic on his face. We can't that's going to lose it. Like if it's going to look like someone wearing like a flesh mask, or and obviously like someone who's obviously someone wearing a disguise, it's not
Yeah.
worth. They have to buy that. That's like an old a 60-year old English woman.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. The biggest thing was to get it to hold up the camera, like the scrutiny under camera. If it was like the big close up of his face, and you could like see a little bit of Robin Williams. That's the thing. They had to get the balance of how much it can't be eerily flawless, but it can't we can't see the seams. And there are many touch ups in between takes of like, okay, we got to make sure like you can't see like any string from the wig or anything like showing. So there's a lot of stuff there. It
Or
took
5 o'clock shadow.
certainly it's a 4 hour makeup process to put him in this. And I mean certain that's the thing. He's not like wearing like green alien skin or anything, so it's not like Guardians of the Galaxy, which
Mm-hmm.
by today's standards is a lot easier than it ever has been.
Yeah.
Like it's not Hellboy. Hellboy's there's one for you. Hellboy, it's like a 6 to 8 hour process.
Yeah.
This is like 4 hours still. But here's the tricky thing: no one's really taken into account. It's not just putting the makeup on; it's the fact that we have like full costume changes and timed to be in camera for 40 seconds. Like remember in the restaurant when he's changing out of that suit and putting on like the changing costumes before our eyes. That's done in 40 seconds. And then it's sped up from there. So it's less than 40 seconds, but he has to do all that. And then, like with the mask and everything, there's kind of a Texas switch thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. So, anyway, so famously, there's this famous story actually. Robin Williams, once they kind of nailed the makeup, he walked the streets as Mrs. Doubtfire, and he walked into a sex shop, and he basically bought all these adult toys just to really mess with the mess with the people behind the counter and everything.
That's hilarious
It was
and very classic Robin Williams.
exactly. So that was ultimately a test. And Eddie Murphy did something kind of similar in preparation for coming to America. He did like on SNL. I think he did this sketch where basically Eddie Murphy became white. So basically, there was like a little sketch that did, kind of would lead to stuff like coming to America. So it was kind of like that's the test you put up the scrutiny for any makeup. If you can go around and fool people.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the other thing I want to mention. I don't want to go on too long here. This is kind of important though. The other big challenge of the film, believe it or not, it's half the makeup, but the other half is that Rob Williams is a notorious improviser, as we all know. The man improvs like he breathes.
Yeah.
Because of that, in this film, there's practically three cuts. In the edit there was practically three cuts of this movie, depending on his improvs, because you had the PG cut, the PG-13 cut, which ultimately they ended up going with because of one sequence in the movie that was just too adult. Otherwise, the movie would have been PG.
Mm-hmm.
And then R. So there was PG, PG-13, and R.
Man, knowing how Robin Williams can just
Mm-hmm.
really go for it, really want to see a rated R version. But also, I'm surprised they just didn't go for a PG version. Because I figured you want to have it to be the most marketable movie possible. And considering Chris Columbus, like, is like the kids movie director. Like, you figure PG would be, because wasn't Home Alone rated PG at the time?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so like I would figure, well, Robin Williams, he's big off of Aladdin. He would be very funny for kids to watch. I'm surprised they just didn't go with a PG rating, but
Well, I think let me put it this way: it was the movie's essentially PG, but it was like the thing where it's so weird. We're pre Temple of Doom, and I forget if it was Temple of Doom.
No, we're
Temple of
post.
Doom and Gremlins. Pre Temple of Doom. I'm not saying he directed this. I'm just saying it's so weird that the movies that invented the PG-13 rating, which is Temple of Doom and Gremlins.
Yeah.
Before that, you had all these PG movies that could like get away with at least like one F bomb or something, or which is so weird. They can get away with something. And I imagine kind of like how it is now, like post the rating, may have been like an oversensitive time in the '90s, perhaps, where it's like, hey, this movie's PG until we get this one scene in the restaurant where all the kids leave the table to pick out the desserts, and you have Mrs. Doubtfire
Oh, yeah.
mentioning the power tools in the bedroom thing. That's what got him the PG-13.
Okay. I guess I would figure it'd be the smoking thing, but in '93, smoking didn't really have the sort of change their reputation. There was growing there. It is interesting, like for this movie. I guess we go jump in the opening of the movie when
Yeah,
like Daniel Hillard is doing his voiceover, and like you have a cartoon character smoking, and you have the guy who's like conducting the voice recording session smoking. You have the three guys who are smoking, and it's like because I know like for example like the Insider, like the movie in the 1999 with Russell Crowe, Al Pacino, that goes into like the tobacco industry, trying to hide evidence of smoking, killing people, all that stuff. It's like the early '90s is such an interesting inflection point where like smoking was just such a prevalent part of American society, and thing like post maybe 94, 95, like smoking is kind of like grow less and less for like from 2000s onward, especially 2010s. Smoking is not really as common uh, as you would see in movies and TV. So it was kind of a sort of an interesting like time capsule moment.
so the opening, there's a very interesting story with the opening. I think you're going to like Rohit. I don't
Okay.
know if you've ever heard this. I heard most of this, but I kind of forgot there's one element of it I did not know, which kind of wowed me. So a lot of people have always pointed out, yeah, it's a big leap, or it's kind of a misrepresentation of like how voice acting goes, where usually the you have the actor performing, and then we animate around that. So you have the script, then the actor, and then the animation. And that's not to say you don't have looping. Looping is when you like for example, Tim Curry was the original voice of the Joker in Batman the Animated Series, and then he left. But those original episodes they recorded, Mark Hamill had to loop the first Joker episodes until Joker's favor.
Mhm.
So that's just an example. So it does happen, and that's kind of the liberty they're taking here. So the idea here is perhaps he's replacing someone, or most likely the head. According to Chris Columbus, what happened was the implications that this is probably like a foreign cartoon that he is dubbing. Actually, that was the headcanon that Chris Columbus was operating on for why for basically how we can show Robin Williams voice acting, which of course coming off of Aladdin was very much the intent of like let's show Robin Williams do voices, which he's going to have to do, and kind of give it people a taste of Aladdin, even though it's going to be maybe a bit of an accurate portrayal. But anyway, here's all of that. That's just a factoid. Here's the actual thing you want to know. Originally, there was supposed to be a short before the movie, and that was this Chuck Jones cartoon that he is looping. And the idea is that okay, you would have had like Daniel Hillard, like Robin Williams doing the voice of this cartoon, which may or may not have tied into the movie, like almost like kind of like we had with the Into the Spider Verse, like Spider Ham cartoon, where it kind of ties in the movie, but it's kind of like the short before the movie almost.
Or yeah, but that's such that would have been so
But here's the here I didn't even get to the best part yet.
okay.
Okay, so that's the thing. Here's the part that I didn't know. Like the Tom and Jerry, like the Tom and Jerry shorts, or I bet the Tom and Jerry, or I guess more appropriately, kind of like like Sylvester and Tweety, which is what they're going for here.
Mhm.
You would have had the Granny character, and the Granny character would have been the Mrs. Doubtfire voice, so it would have given an origin to where he pulled that character from. Because remember, he was building to like he had all the bad nannies. He was basically improvising all the bad housekeepers and the bad nannies. But he had a surefire winner at the end there, so we would have seen where he had gotten that from.
Mm.
So had we gotten that full short, we would have like had her like probably leave him alone in the room, and that would have been Mrs. Doubtfire's voice, and then we would have had Daniel Hillard. So the solution that we do have, it is still interesting because it does give us a lot of like who Daniel Hillard is. He gives us kind of like this guy's really the guy's a creative. He's a bit of an actor. He can do voices, which is going to be very pivotal to the plot. We
Mhm.
see how he lost his job. He lost his job being basically with integrity for he took integrity and responsibility for kids who would watch the cartoons.
Yeah.
So he cares about kids, and also I like to read between the lines on this. I think it's a little bit of a dig at what Disney did to him on Aladdin. A little bit.
Also, I think if also considering like children's like educational television is such a prominent part,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would not be surprised if Robin Williams was and at that time was like a big fan of like Mr. Rogers and like his impact, and I think probably for Robin Williams, him kind of being like involved in children's TV is kind of like a tribute or like inspired by such, you know.
I mean, he was on Sesame Street once, so it is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I still like to think it's a bit of a dig at like he's trying to have like some integrity, and he kind of walks out ticked off at the voice director and everything. It feels a little bit like he
No,
wants to be a mad.
would have been a more explicit dig at Disney is that like as soon as Daniel leaves, there's another guy comes in that does like an almost exact impression of his voices.
Oh God! If like Dan Castellaneta walked right in, oh, it would have been funny. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, by the way, fun fact: when they shot this, I know like the sequences it has cuts and edits in it, but just so you know, every time Robin Williams like he did the looping, that's him actually doing the looping in camera. That's like him and all in one take. So he's looping that entire scene. So if there's a flub or there's a cut or like they just do another take of it, he's got to do that whole opening again without a cut.
God,
That's crazy, right?
it's crazy that
And that's
Robin.
two characters. He's playing technically three because he's Daniel. He's Daniel. He's the cat, and he's the bird.
Yeah, it's just crazy that I don't think like Robin Williams. It's crazy that Robin Williams didn't have like as such a pivotal voice acting career say like Mark Hamill. Because honestly, man, that guy's talents is just
I mean, here's the thing. He did voices after obviously he did voices after Aladdin and other things. But yeah, I do have to wonder though, is if it did scare him off of it a little bit because he did Fern Gully kind of in a space before Aladdin. It was like I don't know, it was a little question of like which came first. I think Fern Gully technically came first in terms of what they were doing there. But still, just the idea that Ron Williams was he did really love the voice acting, and we basically the way he did this opening is exactly how he did Aladdin. I mean, with the exception of the whole looping angle, but essentially him just like coming up with stuff in the booth and just like completely improvising the scene.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Yeah, I have to wonder though if because he really didn't do it a lot, and it was occasionally there, but yeah, you gotta wonder. So we go from the comedy of our opening here, which establishes okay, this guy's going to have the necessary skills for what he pulls later in this movie, which is traditionally how you want to open any movie with something like that.
Mm.
Let's talk about the big divorce scene.
Well, I'm thinking about just well, really before that, the whole like I think it's interesting what I watch because I just watched the movie today and I haven't seen it in ages. In the preparation for this podcast and seeing like Daniel's suggestion of the birthday party and it'd be like a whole petting zoo situation. I really was kind of taken aback, and it's kind of interesting because like I remember watching this movie like plenty of times growing up, and him being doing a petting zoo, he didn't really like register in my head. And I think now it's like, oh, I really feel for
Miranda.
Miranda in that scene because it's like it's ridiculous. Like one, the son is specifically like I think Miranda may have not really meant like he can't have a birthday party or that he
Mm-hmm.
can't have an extravagant party because of his grades. But I think the way Daniel goes about doing things, like Miranda does, I really feel for Miranda. It's like you always trying to like take things to like,
We're playing it even though. That's what's really fascinating about it, right? Because we're showing there's again, it feels like a real like there's like a real marital thing going on here where he's sorry the son has gotten a bad report card, so
Mhm.
he's not getting a big party. But she's going to get him a cake and she got him presents, so she's not a monster.
Yeah.
But still, it does feel like, I mean, come on, let the like just because the kid gets bad grades doesn't mean you don't let him have a birthday party. So admittedly, she's being a little, like she might be a little maybe a little more disciplinary than she needs to be in that instance.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't, Daniel isn't in the wrong for, come on, let the kid have a party. He's not in the wrong with that, but he overstretches severely with, like, let's literally have barnyard animals.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think
And
that
that does
speaks,
not come cheap.
yeah.
And considering considering he just quit his job, it's really irresponsible to do that because Miranda has to be the one to pick up the tab and pay for the
Well, they
bill.
established she's mainly the breadwinner. Like, his thing is probably not bringing a lot of money anyway, but it is like it's a two income household, though.
True, but at the same time, like he was at least employed and getting some money. The fact that he quit from his job and then went ahead to do this big expensive party, it's like I think the principle of it is like
So revisiting the movie, it's really interesting to see like the things that may have gone over our heads as kids. Like, we're seeing like there's actually, it's not mom bringing the hammer down on dad here. It's like this is like there are issues in this marriage, and we're kind of seeing it in a natural way versus like it being completely spelled out to us here.
yeah,
Like she's that's the thing. Like, Sally Field has a really hard job here because worst case she's going to be like the worst of Skylar White. Worst case, and I think she plays in such a way where she could have become that, but she didn't. We're seeing there's sympathy for this woman, but she also is kind of like gutting our guy emotionally here. But it's not coming out of nowhere, and he's not quite getting it. But he has to go through the whole movie to really get it,
yeah,
to get where she's coming from. That's the thing. These are two people that have sired children together. So I mean, they love these kids, but they don't quite love each other. Like, as she says later in the movie in a really great scene, I don't like who I am around him. Like, she hates being the disciplinarian. She hates being the shrill disciplinarian. She doesn't want to. She's putting herself in the kid's perspective.
mm.
I don't want to be that mom. I don't want to be like the wet blanket. And it's not just like why do you always be the fun one? It's like, well, no, I hate being relegated to this role, and you're not splitting the workload there with me, buddy.
Yeah, if anything, I feel like a line that could have been very realistic for Miranda to say to like Daniel, it's like, you know, when we first got married and had 3 kids, I thought we would be parenting these 3 kids. But over time, Daniel, I realized I was parenting 4 kids.
Exactly. But yeah, seriously, it's a big challenge to have her be likable, and I think they did a really good job with that, right?
Yeah, no, no, and I think like I wonder for people who maybe like see themselves a lot in Daniel's character, or maybe just haven't necessarily gone through a lot of like mature adult relationships. If they don't see like, also I think part of it's like Robin Williams is such a charismatic, likable like actor that if Daniel was played by anyone else, maybe we wouldn't necessarily be on his side or be as sympathetic as you really wouldn't be for someone in real life.
So that's the thing. He's a big kid, but not just like, I mean, well, he's literally played a big kid with the movie Jack. So that's kind of
Mm.
to some degree. There's a little bit of that there, but yeah, it's the thing. The man's a big kid with like this infectious energy and charm that you can't hate the man.
Yeah,
But you can see that, and this is the thing. I think Robin Williams probably had a little bit in real life too, because I mean, the man did have, the man had a lot of energy, and at times, he would party hard, and that was like a thing his partners kind of had to deal with. Or it's I don't know if that's maybe him. I think the movie hit him in a personal space, and I think that's really why he was really able to navigate it the way he did and really get into these scenes, because this is actually the divorce argument was actually the hardest scene in the film to shoot for him, for everyone, because it was like a really dour day on the set apparently when they shot this, because they had to bring the tone down, man. It was a very realistic, divorce argument. And this is a pivotal scene in the movie for like the divorce theme of like explaining, like, every kid who's been through divorce is going to see that scene, and they're going to like, recognize like the kids like looking through the banisters and just seeing like their world kind of crumble before them when mom and dad are having the "I don't love you" moment, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the great like follow ups too is when his son, when Chris is apologizing for like having a party, and I love how he's just going to his son's defense. It's a huge moment for the movie where it's like you have to reassure the kids, hey, it's not your fault. And it's not his fault, you know. It's not his fault at all for like this birthday thing. These are other issues at play.
Hmm. And I think what's interesting is that Daniel becomes a better person, or at least a more capable adult, through being divorced from Miranda, which is interesting because oftentimes when you see stories of like characters that get divorced, it's like men that used to be capable, confident, or like had control of their lives start to decline and lose a sense of themselves after divorce. And I
Yeah,
think and I think those stories when they do that, there is an implicit idea that like divorce is like Armageddon or doomsday for any average person to go through. Whereas this, it's like it's a disruption, it's a specific disruption in one's lives, but you grow, adapt, and in some cases, through divorce, you have an opportunity to reflect on what led you to that situation and what could you do to. You can't really go back and undivorce your loved one, but how do you put yourself in a position to where you can be the best person possible, if not the sake, not really for the sake of your former partner, but for the children that look up to you as the guiding parent?
yeah. A few comments here, real quick. Kogia says Rob Williams might have been more expensive to get in voice acting projects than Mark Hamill, and he then goes on to say Williams had a prolific live action career as opposed to Hamill, whose only iconic live action roles are Skywalker and the Trickster. So that is. I didn't mean to undercut your point there, but I just want to speak to this real quick here, where it's that yeah, I mean, the other thing Robin Williams too is that the man does improvise so much that he is also a bit of a challenge in the voiceover community. I'm sure because he's providing like in a numerous amounts of takes, and he's never going to say the role the same way twice. Like imagine Robin Williams would never be able to do like a video game role like Mark Hamill in Arkham City. Never be able to do that.
Yeah, because you would have to stick to the script really hard, and also like, well, also especially nowadays for video game development, where actors not only do the voices but do like the motion capture.
Mhm.
Like Robert Williams has so much energy, like it would be such a pain in the ass. Like, and I think the VFX artists wouldn't necessarily hold anything against him, personally, but like it'd be kind of a struggle to like really like he is such an animated figure. The way he moves, the way he gesticulates, all that stuff, like that'd be hard for any person to like really get a hold of. So, um, no, so yeah, I think like and also I think part of it's like Mark Hamill, like after Star Wars, kind of chose for more low key parts. It wasn't really like the kind of personality or position to like really make himself stand out in such a way. Whereas Rob Williams, like he had stand up comedy, he had movies, he had television, like animation, he was like
Ron Williams traversed a lot of mediums. He was
yeah
able to traverse a little bit of everything. Now, on the flip side, there, it was spoken about earlier. I forget who specifically mentioned it, but yeah, it is a shame that Rob Williams never really got to do any comic book stuff. That was a shame because he's always talked about for a lot of stuff. We never really made it happen.
yeah.
Like many times, like there was a little bit of mainly the Riddler. There's a little bit of Joker talk, I think, at a time, but I don't fully recall how serious it was. At least I know that anyway. Um, the the other thing too is that with Mark Hamill, he unfortunately Mark Hamill is it's as it is to say he was kind of like a thing where he wasn't quite like a marketable star. In Star Wars, he kind of had got the break of a lifetime where he got to be the lead of that movie, and he's a good actor and was a wonderful actor. Unfortunately, after Star Wars, it was like the peak that he had. He kind of hit like almost like an Adam West esque kind of dry spell, whereas everyone's only seeing him as Luke Skywalker, at least in live action, without seeing the range that this guy is capable of. And it feels like, again, if perhaps the medium were, at least at the time, were taken a little more seriously, and people actually like, oh man, this guy's got acting chops. Let's put him in some live action stuff, like put more live action stuff. Like give him some like leads in films and projects and TV stuff,
Or
perhaps.
if like maybe if Mark Hamill had the opportunities like Harrison Ford did to branch out to other Lucasfilm films, and
Hmm.
really kind of like sink his teeth in, he might have had like something outside of just Luke Skywalker.
It will
Although,
always be a crime that Mark Hamill did not get like. I know he's happy doing the character roles, and he's great at like doing. The man is a wonderful character actor as well, but it really we know he's capable of so much more. And it's the industry just I did. It's feeling the industry didn't give him a shot.
no, honestly, like Mark Hamill could very easily do like any small scale indie drama from Fox in a Fox Searchlight movie, A24, like directors like Darren Aronofsky or like Noah Baumbach, I think can definitely like utilize Mark Hamill in a movie, and he would do really well. Um, but no, yeah, I it is a shame, but I think Mark Hamill seems to be happy where he's at in his career, and he had the opportunity to revisit Luke Skywalker and a big movie and Last Jedi and all that stuff. So, and he still has like plenty of work in voice animation. So, if nothing else, like little kids are going to like have memories embedded of his voice, and that's something that you can't take away from him. So,
Right. Okay, so the montage work. I want to talk about the montage work in this one. I think the montage again to Raja Gosnell, who again not a great director, but the man, at least in this film, very solid editor. I mean, I think he did a really good job in piecing together this movie, which must have been such a Herculean challenge given all the takes of Robin Williams. Yeah, he we have like we have all the needle drops in this movie are flawless, and it took a lot of doing, and it was a rather expensive movie with the needle drops chosen, but I think they were very very well chosen. Some of the main montages here we had him demonstrating that he does voices the Mrs. Sellner, which has that great bit of like, Mr. Hiller, do you think you're funny? He's like, I used to, but I was wrong. Thank you for enlightening me to this. Then we have like all the bad housekeeper calls, like during the interview process, where he just improvises calling on the phone, so like days at a time, separately, like giving like the horror stories just to scare her off until basically building up Mrs. Doubtfire.
mhm.
Then Mrs. Doubtfire hanging with the kids and everything, and like like improving at the job, and in turn Daniel is kind of growing as a person as well. While this is all, it's really I don't know. I always liked the montage works. I felt were kind of like these jaunty moments of fun comedy and progress.
Yeah.
So our film's premise here, we're rooting for Daniel. Even the judge is rooting for Daniel. He's saying, "Look, I want to be very clear. We don't want to just favor the mother like the stereotype here in divorce court. We want to really give you a shot here." But because basically Daniel has fallen into kind of a crack here in a sense, and that he picked the worst possible time to get a divorce because it's right when he's out of work, and of course in leaving the house he does not really have a place of residency, so he's got to find a place first off. The point is him not getting custody is kind of poorly timed there, which also gives us kind of an imperative for him to really do something desperate that we need to buy in this movie he would do to be with his children more than just a Saturday.
Mhm.
And again, I like that it's like a thing where no sane man would ever do this, but we like him, and he is we established with the birthday party this guy, his fatal character flaw is that he's into it doing he goes extremely he leans into the extremes
Mhm.
because he's a creative madman, so he thinks like a creative madman.
Yeah.
So but here's the thing, I like that he made an honest run at things. He did, because think of it, even before he really gets the Doubtfire job, he's made an honest run at things. He has like the film canister shipping job. He has an apartment, but it's a little, kind of run down. I mean, initial. I mean, from before he's unpacked and everything, it's actually an okay apartment. But that's what I'm saying. So he has made an honest run at things, but this the separation from his kids and the status quo, it's a rough adjustment. It's just killing him on the inside. So he gets the idea of the housekeeper thing, which here's the big chicken or the egg question, my friend. I want to pose to you. So it is posed in this movie before he takes giving him when he gets the light bulb from Mrs. Doubtfire. It's essentially, I'm hiring a housekeeper. Now, if he took that job, he would have steady employment and be with his kids all the time.
Mhm.
But it's a question of, if Daniel were offered to do the housekeeping job as himself, does Miranda say no? Because she says, "I'll think about it," which of course is the cue for the kids. Like, no, it's going to be an instant no, but she's saying it in a nice way. Is her saying no? Is that like is it a boundaries thing for Miranda? Like, I don't want the kids confused by it's divorce, but like he comes by every day and I'm paying him money now, or is it? And on the other side of it, do you think Daniel is Daniel doing such a good job as Mrs. Doubtfire compared to if he were doing it just as himself? Like, if she's like, what if she did hire him just as himself, as this excuse to keep him around and have him like as a loophole for, I want you to have visitation with the kids in a more equal way. So we're going to calm the system. I'm going to let you work as the housekeeper. Win-win for everyone. Do you think he would have actually improved and gone through the journey had that happened, or do you think he, without the risk and reward of Mrs. Doubtfire, he would not have improved?
I think there's a phrase said by Kurt Vonnegut, famed writer of Slaughterhouse-Five. He said that be careful what mask you wear because oftentimes you can become the mask you wear. So I think in this case for Daniel, had he not been Mrs. Doubtfire, I think one, I think just him himself, it would have blurred the lines. Is he a housekeeper or is he being the dad? If it's just him. Two, I think legally, probably Miranda's following the advice of her attorney. Is like, hey, when the judge agrees to this visitation, agrees to the setup, generally agreed for the setup to be followed by both parties, and that if there's any changes made, either one of them has to make a petition for it to be heard in court for consideration, or you wait until you like after 3 months you revisit this, and then you can change up the custody situation. So I think like her saying no is probably because that's legal. Like it would kind of I don't think like Miranda, because considering if she consents to it, I don't know if it would necessarily be problematic legally. I think it's most likely just if after 3 months, regardless of if like Daniel got a job or money, her like I think probably her lawyer would advise against having Daniel involved beyond the Saturday visits, because then after 3 months, if Daniel's able to make a case that like, hey, I'm basically paid as a housekeeper, I'm similar duties to what as his father, that gives him more authority, that gives him more grounds to like seek for joint custody. Whereas maybe her attorney, whether if Miranda expresses wishes or not, maybe he's wanting to have just maintain the status quo of sole custody with the dad having visitation.
Yeah, speaking of which, Rohit, given that you are in the legal community, did you ever look into the divorce court? Is this ever like a world that you've kind of navigated, or?
I took a family law class in law school.
Mm-hmm.
I could have done better, like final grade wise and all that stuff. And family law is very different from state to state. Although the general rule is like if say if like a couple a family gets divorced and then one parent moves to like another state, there's typically a norm of honoring said custody agreements. Give or take certain exceptions, but I think like so. What specifically are you wanting, like in regards to like how the whole divorce thing is set up?
Well, no, I was just wondering if like you ever like did any divorce stuff, like if you had
No,
like
I never did any family law stuff.
or if you ever had, like an interest in it, or you ever learned like if you had any
No,
correlation with it, like.
beyond just having that one class in law school, family law is one of those areas that I would never want to do or be involved with, because I think it's like family law and criminal law are areas of law where it's like you're seeing people at their worst, um, specifically when they're accused of a crime or if they're going through a divorce. Like you're not seeing people in the best states of mind. Not to say other areas of law don't have clients that are going through tough times, but when your like liberty and or your family is affected, like people really respond in strong and negative ways that you
It's
can't
real dog eat dog in the courtroom when
it's not
divorce
even
court like
doggy.
that.
It's not even a doggy dog. I know there's the whole thing about like divorce lawyers are the ones that kind of write things up, but also like the couples may want are each other's throats, and even then it's like even if it's amicable, it still is like you are ending a chapter in your life where you had the expectation that you were going to spend the rest of your life with your spouse and your children, and then now that is an end, and you have a different dynamic where you're not with your spouse anymore, and depending on the agreement, you have joint custody or you don't have custody and visitation, and that whole thing is like it is an artificial setup that most people don't really have experience or understanding of going through until they go through it or
Mhm.
are forced to go through it with divorce. So I think for Daniel, like and how he's feeling and all that, I think he very much, Dan, like it'd be. I think he's speaking as Robert Williams' mouthpiece. I think he's definitely speaking. He's definitely an avatar for a lot of people that've gone through like really tough divorces. And but what I appreciate about this movie is that divorce is not seen as this like thing to overcome. It's a thing to get through to move on to a different stage of your life. That yes, it's not what you expect, but getting through it and having a sense of family is really important. So I really appreciate sort of like what I appreciate. The one thing I just want to point it out. So like in divorce is cut like cases, judges will always so I actually so I didn't so I took a family law class, and then when I interned for a judge in my first summer after my first year of law school, I would see a lot of like custody disputes, like family courts in the courthouse that I worked at. The family law judge will always advise the parties, the like parents and whatnot, to never talk bad about the other parent when they have said kids. And I really appreciated that dynamic was like commented upon when like Daniel
As Mrs. Doubtfire says, like, don't you want the kids to leave the room before you verbally berate the
and
father?
and this is after like a few scenes ago where like Daniel wishes dysentery on Miranda.
Yep.
And when like
He's making wife jokes at the table when the kids are eating Chinese. So
yeah, and like when Mara Wilson's character Maddie like rightfully points out, why do you want to wish on mom? And Daniel's like, oh, that's he realizes that he messed up,
he's
and
gone too far. He realizes,
yeah,
he's like,
and
I don't want my kids to
yeah,
hate their mother. No, no, I
you're
don't want.
supposed to not poison the well of the other parent because ultimately, while you're not together as like husband or wife, in marriage union, you are together in co-parenting. So make talking bad about your other parent is going to make the other parent's job very difficult when they're trying to do discipline, when they're trying to like spend time with their children. So when those moments are called out by the characters, I really appreciate that because I think Chris Columbus and Rob Williams were very attuned to not having either divorced parent to be an outright bad guy.
Of course. So in getting to the Mrs. Doubtfire of it all here, one, Uncle Frank, played by the wonderful Harvey Firestein, supportive brother, also in the arts, like Daniel with the voice acting. He's in the arts with makeup. He's very much the X factor in getting us Mrs. Doubtfire. And that's the way in which we create Mrs. Doubtfire. It's we see a realistic makeup process. This is essentially what he went through. There's only one deviation from how it works, from how the effect actually worked in makeup. Nowadays, I feel if we've actually changed this to be a little more similar to how we're doing it now. But essentially, makeup is done in several pieces you apply to the face, not just like the Scooby Doo esque flesh mask.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the one leap that they took, and I think that's a respectable leap, just for like the quick changes that we're gonna do. You want to make it just like a piece that you can just like peel off and then put on like a dummy or something,
Yeah.
essentially. So, like that, that I think that's a fair liberty to take. Anyway, so my favorite for me, my easily my favorite scene of this entire film, nostalgically and still to this day, is just the makeup. Is the makeup process for Mrs. Doubtfire? Because one, that was probably my first introduction to how you do the makeup.
Mm-hmm.
which is already kind of cool. But then just the fact that we have like Rob Williams, everything works about scenes from a practical standpoint, like the creations of the makeup, just like him like playing around with the character, and then lastly, my favorite part, the big montage of like we finally cracked the code on Mrs. Doubtfire. We're doing like the plasticine. We're making her and we're teasing up like the reveal of Mrs. Doubtfire. We don't reveal her until she enters the house, but like we're seeing like the eyes and everything and the teeth and but my favorite aspect, the reason this scene's my favorite, I think deep down is that I love Frank Sinatra, and this movie is my first introduction to Sinatra. It was Luck Be a Lady.
Oh, that's great.
It was this and Elf. This and Elf were kind of my first real introduction. I'm not saying like there's probably Sinatra in the background of other things. I'm saying the first time it was like a big sequence. They were like, man, I really like this guy's music.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great build, it's a great reveal. It's just a very jaunty sequence. I mean, it's a good time. They're all like celebrating at the end, and they finally it's a clever song. Also, a very expensive song, by the way, to get, but it was worth every penny as far as I'm concerned.
Is it like the Fiddler on the Roof song?
No, 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 no. I'm saying literally, "Luck Be a Lady Tonight." The Sinatra song
Okay,
was
gotcha,
expensive, and I don't know
gotcha.
if it was the most expensive song in the movie. Interesting though, with Fiddler on the Roof, they actually not Fiddler on the Roof. Fiddler on the Roof was fine; they had no issues with that. Barbra Streisand song, because it's a parody, they got away with it.
Oh
But
man,
that does bring about another thing I should mention. Every time Robin Williams did an improvisation and he just made a pop culture reference, they had to scramble to get the rights to said pop culture reference. And you can
oh,
imagine how difficult that might be.
yeah, legal. Okay, I said that like animators may give like Robin Williams some like level of credit, but yeah, if I worked at legal for a Robin Williams movie, I would kind of like secretly hate Robin Williams because
Exactly.
kind of pop culture references or just
Mhm.
things that he would cite or do. It's like you would have to go through so many back channels to like clear or make sure it's like it's used just as a general reference, not like making any specific representations about it, all that stuff. Although I mean, comedy you can get away with a little bit, but still, it's just yeah, no, God, I now think now you say that, I'm just trying to imagine just how much legal has to handle like
How
like
much coffee the legal department was like
no, no,
was like chugging
or
down.
even nowadays with like Ryan Reynolds or Robert Downey Jr. doing their pop culture like reference stuff. It's like, oh, we gotta.
Yeah. Well, admittedly, okay, well, Ryan Reynolds, that one's probably like a similar, but not as. Let me put it this way: it's not as mile a minute as it would be with Robin Williams. Robin Williams, like literally, the man just can't stop himself. Where Ryan Reynolds would be the thing where he just really likes doing it. He'll push for it, but it's the thing. I mean, I forget if like it's the thing where like there's like the edit. I wonder if kind of the if our if things have become a little more lax with the pop culture references in terms of like the rights and everything. I wonder because there was like a thing back then. I wonder if it's still true now, where there's like four tiers of it that you have to if you mention it, you see it, and there's two. I think it maybe one's if you like musically, and then there's a fourth one. Essentially, it's like um,
If you show like footage of like said pop culture thing,
yeah, like if you see it, if you have a photograph, if you like, there's like sorts of things like that. And I wonder if things may have changed over the years, and maybe it's not as bad as it used to be. But I don't know.
or it could be the case that like with so many film studios merging and like being bought up one another, like you're essentially start to reference like your own catalog.
Like for example, Lilo and Stitch, they had to get all they basically used whatever the four categories. They used all four of them for that movie. So like Elvis's picture was shown, the music was used. They talk about him, and there's a fourth thing. That's the thing. You can mention him by name, having his songs, having his visuals, and I mean, I don't think we showed any. We didn't show any footage of Elvis, but we did something. Maybe one
Mhm.
other thing. Anyway, maybe it was Graceland. Maybe it was a location. I don't know because we had like a picture of Graceland at the end. I don't know if that counted or not. But anyway, um, point being, it's a hoop to jump through this movie. I do not pity the legal department. So, Mrs. Doubtfire, she shows up, flawless makeup, and all of this is driven by the fact that we, the audience, like 30, 25 to 30 minutes in the movie, we, we're rooting for this guy. We have knowledge, and he has knowledge to insider knowledge to impress Miranda and the kids. So she lands the job like that, just charms the pants off her. And the fact that while she's being charmed, we are charmed by this Mrs. Doubtfire character. It's not just like, as it was said earlier, a lot of uh, a lot of cross-dressing comedy. Code Geass said this way earlier in the things, is like this film holds up better than the other cross-dressing comedies, but there's more to the story than lowbrow jokes about guys dressing up like women, which obviously now things have, like, the cultural paradigm has shifted tremendously on stuff like this. But nowadays a movie like Miss Doubtfire, I don't think we can. I mean, we do have the Tyler Perry movies, but I think that's kind of like it's kind of like a weird thing where even those I don't know how those are still being made. I don't know how those are still successful, but it's like a
Well,
thing where
I think part of it's that like Tyler Perry just has such a very specific niche audience,
yeah,
and because of that, like he doesn't kind of like hit the like radar of most like people who like write about popular culture and entertainment. So
right,
because of that, he kind of weirdly has a lot more quote unquote leeway, just because there's not that many eyes on him. Whereas for a movie that would have maybe a star of similar like stature to Robert Williams and like it being like a big big like family release, there's gonna be more eyes on him, eyes in that movie, a version of that in 2023, and how like the the politics of like gender representation, gender identity, all of that that probably be more dealt with alongside the whole divorce stuff. But I think for the way the movie works, I don't think like it's any sort of like it doesn't feel any demeaning towards like people who cross dress or people who have like to change the gender identity and all that stuff. I think it's just specifically like the cross dressing is a means to have time to spend with children.
yeah,
But in a way, it is kind of an interesting commentary on like gender roles because you know like Robin Williams Daniel is kind of like he's not like a guy's guy, but he's very much like a dude in the sense that he doesn't really clean his apartment. He doesn't really know how to cook. He's very like gregarious. He's got the 5 o'clock shadow and like the hairy chest hair and all that stuff. But being in this like old, sobering, refined 60-year-old British woman, he gets to have a better sense of being a man through being more capable, being more proactive, having things in order, and I think there's something interesting to be said about like for men that are in that position, if they adopt more quote unquote feminine qualities or things that are coded feminine, they become more better men in the process in the long run. If that makes sense.
right. Well, that's what I'm saying though. Like, we're not going for the cheap laughs. Like, we're actually liking Mrs. Doubtfire, and we're actually buying in. We're buying into it. You know,
Yeah, I mean there is the dude looks like a lady. By is it Aerosmith or ACDC?
it's a really good song though.
It is a good song, but it is kind of an obvious pick for this movie. And it's like I feel like nowadays that song has like a specific yeah, Aerosmith.
Aerosmith.
Yeah, that song has a very specific connotation when brought up. But no, I think for what it is, like Robin Williams doesn't use like him being Mrs. Doubtfire. It's not making fun of women. It's not making fun of like older women. It's not like
It's actually saying older women are cool. That's essentially what it's saying.
yeah, no. It really is kind of like he's taking sort of the like ideas like like oh we all love grandma, right, or a grandma like figure. So he's kind
Yeah,
of using that and the sort of caretaker. This person who has such wisdom. I think it like for Daniel, it's not him taking care of the children. Like Mrs. Doubtfire, the persona is taking care of him and kind of gently pushing him to be like more attentive, more thoughtful, and more like responsible. And this is especially evident of the fact that like it was Doubtfire, he made the kids do their homework, from between 3 to 7, instead of watching Dick Van Dyke. And I bet you they watched Dick Van Dyke because Robin Williams, Daniel Hillard loves comedy, old school comedy, so they would always watch Dick Van Dyke, and probably because of that they didn't focus on their studies. And think with the fact that like as like Miss Doubtfire, she like he she related to the fact that like she likes soccer, she plays soccer to Daniel's son Chris, but very much emphasized the studies were important. So it is interesting that like over time, like Mrs. Doubtfire is kind of like a balance of both Daniel's way of looking at things and Miranda's way of looking at things.
And also, Ms. Doubtfire is able to have conversations with Miranda that he was never really able to have with her when he was married to her.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really interesting
And that
to.
really gave him an insight on their relationship, and I think it really helped him.
Yeah, not only that, but I think there's something to be said about like the fact that like for divorce, like for movies or stories about divorce, like you have the man who is like facing the ennui, the grief, and like the struggle of being divorced and feeling like a sad sack or a loser. But in this, it's like you focus on not necessarily the woman being like a sad sack loser, but also like you get to really see like two women have really frank conversations about how they feel about their expectations and disappointments with their marriages. And I feel like that's scenes like that were probably relatable to a lot of women who happen to watch the movie and have been gone through divorces or have known people have gone through divorces because they probably likely had those conversations.
Right. So, a few other things too. So again, while we don't do the traditional like, oh, there's a locker room scene or like something like that, or like a Big Mama's house kind of like comedy,
Mm-hmm.
where we do have something that I really love this structurally looking at the movie. We have a warm up for the third act. We have like a lot of duality comedy between like Daniel and Mrs. Doubtfire need to be in two places at once. And we have like a great warm up to that with Mrs. Sellner. Miss Sellner shows up. I love Miss Sellner, her actor. I'm blanking on the actress's name, but she was in Liar Liar, and I love Liar Liar. She was I think it was Greta. I think her name was Greta in Liar Liar. The she was Jim Carrey's Fletcher Reed's character's the assistant slash secretary in that film. Anyway, so she's showing up and she's like the caseworker and she's supposed to check on the apartment and lo and behold there's Mrs. Doubtfire. So we have this. It's a great warm up for like the quick changes that we're going to see, and we show like okay, this is what it looks like under like the bodysuit and everything, and like how he does it, which we're going to need to know for Act Three when he's going to be doing it like left and right. And we show that Daniel can think on his feet. And he's we have this great gag where he like, loses the mask and gets run over, and it's like, what is he gonna do now? And he has this great improvisation. I don't mean like a line. I just mean like a physical thing where he doesn't like. Originally, they were going to do like a thing where he's going to like, use like an avocado mask, but the way he applied the impromptu avocado mask never looked good. So they needed a fix. So like, what if it's a cake? So he's plops his face in that cake, and this was complete like practical effect improvisation where the lights melted the mask off, so it started to drip into the tea.
Yeah.
They
No.
kept it in the movie.
Yeah, it's such a testament to Robin Williams' talent to see that kind of like mess up or screw up, and use that to add to the comedy of the situation.
He's rolling with it, man. So
Mhm.
he's brilliant here. My favorite gag, dude, is like when he's one of my favorite jokes is when he's like he just has the wig on, but not the rubber masses. Like, oh, Norman Bates.
Which is funny because in looking at the filmography of the actress that plays Miss Sullivan, her name's Anne Haney. She actually played um, a character in the 1998 version of Psycho, the one that has Vince Vaughn, Julianne Moore, Viggo
Right.
Mortensen.
Oh the Gus Van Sant remake.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
All right. So let's see. We should talk about Stu. So Stu, played by Pierce Brosnan, who was brought up earlier. We have Aunt May in this movie, and we also have Doctor Fate.
And James Bond.
True. And this was really close to this predates. If I understand, this predates James Bond. The presumption is that maybe the studios were seeing this like, man, that Pierce Brosnan's pretty good in that movie. Let's give him a call
Well,
back.
because actually, I don't know if you're familiar with like the history of the James Bond franchise. Like, I think Pierce Brosnan was supposed to have like been cast to play Bond like early on the mid to late '80s.
So he was supposed to be the Timothy Dalton Bond, and then they went the other way with it.
Yeah, because like he was contractually still obligated to do like not the Saint, but like some TV show that like Pierce Brosnan was like the main lead in.
Hmm.
And then once that show was either done or like he was able to get out of the contract,
Remington Steele.
Remington Steele, yeah, because it went
With,
from
by the way, Remington Steele co-stars Stephanie Zimbalist, who is Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.'s daughter, who is Alfred from Batman the Animated Series.
oh wow,
And Stephanie was on Batman the Animated Series. She played Janet Van Dorn, the new DA who took Harvey Dent's place.
I see.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So Remington Steele. The point being, he had a prior commitment, so they had to go elsewhere. But they definitely had him in mind. So when Timothy Dalton didn't want to come back, let's call up Brosnan.
Yeah, and this is just 2 years before GoldenEye, so that's
Mm-hmm.
good. That like imagine if like Daniel Craig was like in a really like wacky comedy with Will Ferrell like a year or two before Casino Royale.
Oh, crazy.
Um,
All right. Let's see. So what's great about Brosnan here is that originally, as you can kind of tell, originally there were changes applied to this film. There's like 30 minutes of deleted scenes. Of this film that practically there's an extended cut of Mrs. Doubtfire they could have made, and it's not like any of these scenes like were like all, like changed ideas they didn't want to have or anything. It was just literally there wasn't time for it because they wanted the movie to be an economic kind of pacing there, and they just felt all of it was just kind of like added pacing you didn't need. They literally cut the fat. It wasn't really losing anything. But like for example, the nosy neighbor who ratted him out about the petting zoo, which I do feel was an overstep for her. Like, deal with him. Don't call the mother.
I mean, it might be indicative of the fact that like she's like had interactions with Daniel before, and Daniel never listened. So, and then she had to go, and then in those situations, she had to go over his head to get Miranda's attention, and that's really
Either way, there was a running subplot in the movie they cut completely. Or Mrs. Doubtfire was giving her gardening advice because again, her precious plants being threatened by the animals led her to make the call. Daniel's revenge on her was that she tricked her into using essentially dog urine to like water her plants and ended up killing her plants. Well, it was the idea like the whole essentially there was this line basically I forget it was literally right after the restaurant scene or not or Mrs. Doubtfire like Daniel without the mask on was walking back and she said this is you it's just like yeah we've been pissing on your baby's space walks on.
oh man, I well, that would be
It was a
fun.
dark moment. It was a bit of a dark moment.
It is funny. It is a dark moment. Also, I feel like this movie kind of almost pushes things to a certain, almost to a
Yeah, I
certain
mean he
point.
almost kills poor Pierce Brosnan in this
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, and it's like, what did you expect? What like when he says allergic, like what do you expect? Like I just kind of curious, like what
Well,
does
that's the thing though. Here's the fascinating thing. We set up him getting drunk throughout that thing. That's him
oh
making
that's
it, and we
right.
set up in two places. Remember, so here's what I was getting at. So when they go to the pool originally, and you can kind of sense this in the script, he would have had that conversation with the guy at the bar who recognized him. He would have said basically, I guess the shorthanded. He was going to basically turn into Alec Baldwin from the Cat in the Hat movie. He was essentially going to ditch the kids or send them to a boarding school as soon as he got in with the mother. That's what his plan was originally, and then they decided, let's. I don't want to make him the bad guy. I don't want to like that's. It's very uncreative. It's been there, done that. It's a cliche. We make the handsome thin man. We make him the bad guy in comparison to our furry chubby protagonist.
Yeah,
So yeah, they decide no, make him he actually likes the kids. I mean, he's calling the father a loser, but I mean, technically, I think we like him, but he's
yeah,
screwing up a lot in the
yeah.
opening.
If we just see this from an out, if we were to see this situation happen in real life,
Basically he's Howard Hamlin from Better Call Saul. It's essentially what he is.
yeah,
But you're right, from an outsider's perspective, yeah, it's a different look on it's a different real situation. It's
yeah,
yeah. So anyway, so yeah, he's kind of getting drunk and bitter at the bar there, and also that moment was really impactful too, where it's the fact that he says to himself, like, this is going beyond obsession, because that's him realizing after he's started to grow to the arc and everything, he's kind of realizing this is not sustainable, and I'm reaching a point where what am I even doing? I'm watching my replacements. This is weird. So that's the thing. So he's kind of drinking those feelings away, which I mean, look, I don't want to bring the room down here, but I think maybe to some degree I'm reading into things here. But I don't know. Rob Williams did I believe he did go into AA and stuff. He did have a bit of a thing going on there. I don't know if perhaps there's a little bit of real life bleeding into the emotions of that scene. I don't know. Because he did. I don't know what he did during his divorce. I'm sure it was not were not happy feelings.
Yeah.
I don't know. But again, that was just like one dour scene of it, and the rest is kind of like comedy farce. Where okay, so he's getting tipsy between two tables. He's drinking Chardonnay, and the other table is drinking like these doubles of Scotch again, and he keeps getting loaded up. So he doesn't like this guy. He's already making some very crass remarks about like the power tools in the bedroom, and then he's like, I'm gonna kill. I'm gonna. I'm gonna. I think he just thinks he's gonna break out in hives or something, which makes no sense given it's Pepper.
For
But
the longest while, I didn't realize that his allergy was. I guess it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I didn't. I thought his allergy was to shrimp because I remember distinctly him like
well,
coughing
no,
up.
he ordered the shrimp. He can't. No, it's literally just. It's
No, no,
just.
no, no, like that because it's been a while. I just didn't remember. Like I knew he had an allergy, and like Robin Williams did something in the movie, but I didn't remember what the allergy was. I remember like it was shrimp that like he coughed up. It's like, oh, it must have been a shrimp allergy, and it's like, oh, it's pepper, and it's like it's funny like like when he's like Mrs. Doubtfire in like in like the chef like thing. Nobody bats an eye. Nobody's like, what? Who are you? Who are
It's interesting you say that. There actually was. This is a deleted scene. I think. Look, I don't think we. I think it's just like she. I think it's kind of funny. She's able to walk in, put on a coat, and just be able to get away with it. And the fact they don't care. But Paul Guilfoyle, who was Brass from CSI, he was a young Paul Guilfoyle. He's in this. He is the waiter, and he basically caught him doing this, and she made an excuse to like it's like Cajun style or something, just like so it's like part of the recipe. She walked off.
okay.
So there
Uh,
was a logic there, but I don't think you need it. I think it's just like she just gets away with it.
I honestly thought like because I've not seen the movie in a while. It's like, oh, like if this is the first time you've seen this movie, um, I feel like for a lot of people when like they see like Daniel's like, oh, he realizes table 39 is getting ready. It's like, oh, maybe he's going to mess up the kitchen where there's a delay, and then he could have a little bit more time like as Daniel.
That's actually a good idea. That might have been, but again, they need you don't want to extend the pacing though.
Yeah.
But also, I just want to highlight how impressive it is. They sped up the footage a little bit. Still, he got that down to 40 seconds, changing out of all of that into the Daniel Hillard, like get up. And yeah, it's fast forward a little bit. It's like we're going from 40 to 20 seconds. It's still pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an impressive, crazy sequence. Also, I an element of this movie no one ever talks about. I love Mr. Lundy. I love him impressing the boss of the children's TV. Like essentially the PBS location. I love how they meet, and I love how he basically initially how they meet, where he says like, "Don't you wish you could?" This is always a nice, impactful Rob Williams thing, especially looking back on. It's like, "Don't you wish you could just freeze frame your life and say this is freeze frame things and say this is not my life?" That's a really good line.
It's like don't you ever wish you could freeze frame one moment and say this is not my life?
Exactly. It's a great line.
Yeah.
So he kind of shows him how to entertain the kids very unknowingly. He's just kind of messing around with the dinosaur like display, and then he looks at him like, "Oh my God, yes, you! I want to give you a show. Meet me at Bridges." So Bridges is a real restaurant, by the way. I don't know if it's still around, but it was a real restaurant. Our fancy third act set piece.
Considering this movie is based in SF, you mentioned before about like the apartment that Daniel was in.
Mhm.
It would be kind of sad. I think it's kind of sad to acknowledge that in reality, in this day and age, uh, Daniel would not be able to afford that apartment in today's market rates.
No,
I would, yeah.
of course not. So let's see. He's hmm. Sorry, I was trying to find my.
Okay, it's It is the British restaurant exists still, but it's not based in San Francisco. It's based in a place called Danville.
Oh yes, so I meant to. We have Jacob in the comments. I meant to mention this to him. Yeah, there is a. We have Danville in. We literally have Danville in this movie.
Hmm.
If you count bridges, it's kind of funny. You know, like Danville, a tri-state area from Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so we're pushing duality to its limits here as he's quick changing between the two personas, and he's going to such lengths here, and he's getting tipsier and tipsier as he goes on. He's like slamming into the wall and everything, and he has like lipstick on him still, and he's have this great moment of Mrs. Doubtfire sits at Mr. Lundy's table, and he's like, Daniel, is that is that you? Is like, yes, but I love that he turns it into the sales pitch of like it's a crazy move, but it's like, yeah, this is Miss Duffer, is the character on the show. It's like that's a great. If only he thought of that sooner, he would have saved himself so much trouble.
Yeah. Also, like, I just wonder if he came back just as Daniel, like, how long would he kept the ruse up?
It's a good question.
Would he even got to his pitch, or would he be too drunk to like? He'd be hilarious if he got so drunk and he tried to excuse himself, changed back to Mrs. Doubtfire, and just vomited all over us too.
I come on, I don't know about that. It's a bit much.
I mean, it's
We
better
already had
than
the gag where the teeth
better
came out. I
than.
think I think we got it good.
I mean, I feel like it's better than just like criminal negligent homicide with
Okay,
the.
well, real quick though, it's funny that like Pierce Brosnan, he's such a great straight man to all the insults that Mrs. Doubtfire's laying out for him. Keeps such a straight, he's such a gentleman about it. It's wonderful, but he's a gentleman because he thinks it's a 60-year-old English woman.
Hmm.
So that's a laugh. And plus, it's funny that earlier he called out her accent too, which is also kind of funny.
Yeah.
Let's see. So anyway, big scenes. The Heimlich. It's so weird because the Heimlich reveal. Because we set up that she knows how to do CPR and everything, the Heimlich maneuver and everything. So like, oh no, I killed the SOB practically. He he runs over a full tilt winch. Like Mrs. I love it. It's played as such a heroic moment, but in reality, it's like, well, yeah, he in a drunken state, he basically killed the man. He practically killed the man.
Yeah.
But still, I love it's gonna play this heroic moment. Like, Mrs. Doubtfire is like, I'm going. Help's on the way, Daddy. It's like jumps over like the little wall thing. He's just and saves him. And he's grateful for it too. He's like shaking hands. I like that. It's kind of like a it's kind of evens out. Where well, I mean, you're kind of boned right now, and you did save me, even though you did kind of try and poison me. So I don't know. We're okay, I guess. He shakes his hand. And he walks off. It's kind
Yeah.
of a Marcellus Wallace thing, logic from Pulp Fiction, I guess. I don't know. I'll go with it.
Yeah, I feel like if we heard about the story in the news, we would think Daniel would be is like some insane guy that like infiltrated his family without them knowing, tried to kill like this potential like suitor replacement for him. Like this, like honestly, if you told the story in a newspaper article
I mean,
or
the judge kind of agrees with this. I mean, he doesn't know about the whole about the near poisoning thing, but I mean, he's pretty much like, yeah, this is crazy. You're not seeing your kids again. Well, not sorry, not well, supervised, but you have to be really has to be supervised now. So
even Daniel acknowledges where it's like, okay, we need to keep this a secret, or the next time I'll see you guys will be through plated glass, and it's like, at that point where you could contemplate you liking that jail could be an option, you should stop it. But Robert Williams is so charismatic that he just wills himself to continue.
I love they're smart enough not to tell the little girl, just knowing it's going to backfire.
Although I feel like one critique I have is that in light of the kids knowing, it feels like they act in that scene when they're seeing Mrs. Doubtfire do the thing. They don't act like they know that Mrs. Doubtfire is their dad.
I don't know. I think they were. I think they're laughing at the situation. Remember, they're laughing when the teeth are coming and everything because they know like, okay, that's just our dad with the fake teeth and everything. I don't know. I think they know. But I know what we know they know. I think that's just them playing it as they know.
I don't know. It's just like when things get a little bit more hectic, they feel like they don't have like the looming concerns, like, oh my god, our dad is like about to be found out or whatever. I feel like that could have been a bit.
Admittedly, they probably could have jumped to Dad's defense of like, no, let Mrs. Doubtfire go to bingo. Don't make her go.
Or yeah, or even helped out, or even if maybe Daniel like let in on the fact that he could potentially get like a great job. Maybe one of the kids could have helped out with like,
He would have had to told them that though. He didn't tell them that though.
yeah, no, I think that could have been an interesting dynamic where it's not like Daniel doing the whole like two places at once, but like the kids are also helping out as well.
Right. Okay, so two things we got to mention. Sally Field's reaction to the truth is it's some phenomenal acting. It's the range of emotions she goes through, where it's like she's in shock, she's hurt, she's very angry, and then she's back to being upset. Like the whole time. You know?
The whole time that like the cadence. I had to give props to Sally Field. Like they both sound different enough that I feel different two different roots, but they should. But really, like I wonder how many takes Sally Field had of that, because that's kind of hard to like really land on each like word emphasis in a way that like sounds unique enough, like for giving effect. But I think also like afterwards when once they go to the divorce once you go back to the divorce court, it's also a really well done dour note, with the fact that like Robin Williams was, through all his efforts, he kind of goes back to where he was at the beginning, where he just had like visitation rights for Saturdays, and even more limitations with like a court liaison observing him and like being subject to like psychological testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the judge, I think the judge is right, but I think he's unnecessarily harsh about the whole like discrediting the sentiment he expressed in his statements in the courtroom, saying that's a good performance. Like that's a little uncalled for. He's right about his sentencing. I'm just saying that was a little uncalled for.
I mean, considering Daniel impersonated and basically frauded his family, and
Yeah.
I think he's a different person.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly understand a judge, especially like someone in an adversarial or contentious setting like divorce court, maybe not being willing to give him the full credit in light of something like that. Like, it's one thing to like, oh, like come to
He
like,
didn't have to say it like that, though. He could just ignored the thing and just like went on to a sense of it. No, he had to make a big point about like
oh yeah, you're the actor, so you're just putting on a performance, man.
That's what I'm saying. That
That's
was
not how
uncalled. I'm just saying the way he phrased that was a little insensitive. That's all
honestly, I feel like it would have made sense for the like wife, for like Miranda's attorney to say that,
Yeah,
because then it would have been
but
jazz.
divorce court doesn't really work like that, though. So, wait,
No,
does it though? Like, would she be
well,
able to make like kind of like do a tear down, like
no,
closing? Well, they made
close
closing arguments, but
like
she approached it in a classy way, though. She said, "I think we can rest her case. I think this guy's buried himself. I think we're good."
yeah, very interesting that like Daniel represented himself. I mean, in the logic of this of the scene, you want to have Robin Williams to have this very big and passionate monologue.
Exactly, which he would not really be able to do if his lawyer did it for him.
Yeah, and also part of it is like you wonder if if an attorney heard what Daniel had done for those past 2 months. He wonders like, no, I don't want to represent this guy. This guy.
That was the implication I read it as. I read it as he's, yeah, as read as like, he's like, okay, that's it, I'm out. Dude dressed like a lady, I'm out. Walk like a man, I'm out of here. Anyway, so loses his kids in a big way. Missed death, but then we have this really nice. Our ending was our resolution of things I thought was rather good here. So I love that Mrs. Doubtfire ended up on TV with Kovacs the monkey. Kovacs the monkey's great. I don't know, I'm a sucker for good puppetry. But yeah, it was just really charming, really cute. Like there's no magic reunion, but there's like a full circle conversation that way when she walks to the set. and it's like it goes full circle to the big divorce breakup scene where it's like, okay, now it's them kind of talking about the divorce,
Mm-hmm.
having gone through this journey and having this perspective and this growth and kind of realizing, like the error in each other's ways, but also like, how are they going to move forward there in the end. Yeah. So we do that, and we reward him that he can see that she's. I forget the legal resolution was here. I think she basically allowed visitation rights, or is that like her discretion, or did she reverse like an order or something?
I think she probably threw. They probably handle. Uh, it's probably a thing where maybe there was like an emergency like hearing where like maybe like has her attorney and the attorney obliged to like have Dana be given a little bit more rights beyond just like the Saturday visits, right?
Well, that's mainly was like the supervised, like no supervision, like that's the
Yeah,
thing. Like the whole
yeah,
supervised visits was the big thing, but also it seems like she has autonomy to let him hang out with the kids. That's what it read as to me.
yeah, no,
Anyway,
yeah. Um, I will say though, I mean, not to try to bring this movie to reality, real life. It's like imagine this story plays out in real life. You see in the news, and then it's like, oh, this guy who pretended to be a different person to get with his divorced family for 2 months now gets to take this character that he played as an potential fraud in his family and use that to entertain young children on kids TV. Imagine that played out. Imagine this plays out in our current 2023 era, and just the amount of people that lose their shit on this.
let me put it to you this way, Rohit. Before Robin Williams' untimely passing, there was a lot of discussion on sequels for Mrs. Doubtfire.
Mhm.
And primarily, I mean, I don't think they ever verbalized it, but I mean, to me, they had a whole bunch of bad scripts over the years, and to me, it feels like the commonality was, at the end of the day, the reason it never happened was that it's so hard to justify a good reason for him to don the get up again to become Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, now to be fair, I know there's the TV show set up, but I mean, for that to be like an actual thing beyond like that established plot point, like it's a little. It'd be hard to revisit and find a good reason for him, like to be like passing himself off as Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, really, the most you can do is like weirdly like an in-universe. You could be like an actual TV show version
Mm-hmm.
of like the Mrs. Doubtfire show, but you couldn't be able to afford Robin Williams. You have to have a different actor, and then at that point, why even do something like that? You're not
Like
even
the only way I could ever see him is, and this honestly, this would be more like a short film than it would be like a movie or something, or an hour special or something. I don't know. I think the only way you could have ever done a Mrs. Doubtfire continuation would have been. I gotta be honest. I'm spitballing this in the moment. All right. I think it would be like the Mrs. Doubtfire show getting canceled and him kind of reflecting upon life. But that's not really a feel good comedy though. It's more
no, no,
just
no,
like
no,
that.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. The comedy is like the show was canceled like several years ago, and now he's trying to like get support to like make like a revival on streaming.
Right. I guess what I was getting. I mean, honestly, look, that'd be humorous. But I guess what I'm getting at is you have like again. I like the comedy drama mix of Mrs. Doubtfire. It feels like the end of something that was really big in his life, but like in terms of just like this essentially was a symbol of his divorce,
Yeah,
and just like kind of like addressing that and it being kind of like a remnant there, just him like addressing like the closing of a chapter there. But again, you could go the route of like he's trying to brand Mrs. Doubtfire, which would be funny, but also like, kind of like you could drive a little bit of pathos in there while you're doing that. So but that's what I'm saying. It's a really hard idea to really wrap a studio's mind around, as you can probably guess.
or you could do a
Do it again, but
remake.
she's in a different costume.
You could do a remake where it's like the same plot, but you switch the gender, so it's like a female that's like irresponsible and loses custody of her kid, and then pretends to be a guy to like ingratiate himself.
Ah.
Have it be played by Amy Schumer or Kate McKinnon.
Yes, there's a very I think it was I forget if it was like a fairly recent thing. I know it's coming. I think it's coming to my neck of the woods recently too. But yeah, it's this musical version of Mrs. Doubtfire. They've been doing, and I think mainly for the anniversary. I think it's a few years. I think it was like 2021 is when it really happened. But
Oh man, you know there's gonna be a feature length adaptation of that musical.
anyway, I do want to funny funny. Anyway, so Mrs. Doubtfire, she's got a speech at the end of this movie, which is again the other kind of like a really nice thing. Like a kid sends her a letter about divorce, and we basically end on kind of a nice little kind of. It's important that we end on with a movie called Mrs. Doubtfire. It feels kind of significant that we end on. We see Daniel with the kids, but we hear Mrs. Doubtfire, so we kind of keep her alive in a sense, and
Mm,
it's kind of like with Miranda in the last moments there, where it's about divorce. Basically divorce doesn't leave a bad taste in the mouth at the end of this movie. Like the people shouldn't feel sad like mom and dad didn't get back together because that's not realistic. You want them to leave with we're in like you want Mrs. Doubtfire to reassure you they're in a good place, kids. They're gonna be okay. This happens. Life changes. It doesn't break. It changes.
mhm.
You know. So yeah. So that's the end of the movie. It's when when Miss Doubtfire came out, it was a success. It was a success, not a massive success, and unfortunately got a lot of Tootsie comparisons when it came out, which I felt were unfair. That's not that's saying it was more like like raising Tootsie above Mrs. Doubtfire. But I mean, honestly, I think in comparison, I think Mrs. Doubtfire had a little bit more longevity than Tootsie. But that's just it's my 2 cents. Tootsie's funny, but um, the other thing too is that Deathfire did get. It feels like it was a thing where the more people saw it, again, not a cult thing necessarily, but the more people saw it, and like on home video and everything, I think it really kind of you know, really got its legs, And it did get the Oscar for best makeup, that year it came out. So I mean, it was indeed recognized as it should have been for makeup. So get the victories there. So it's time tested. It's definitely one of the highlights of Rob Williams' career for sure. It's an unconventional film, but it basically took a conventional premise and made an unconventional film, and something special. I mean, Chris Columbus was kind of in the business of making the classics, and I think he did one here.
Yeah, it's a Columbus classic.
Yeah. I guess we should, unless there's anything else you wanted to say, I'll thank our commenters and we'll get out of here.
Just that I, for like you said, the good comedy, good drama balance, and I think for people that have been in divorce situations, whether you were one of the divorced parents or you saw your parents get divorced, I think this is a movie that can bring some comfort, bring some joy, and can provide a compassionate perspective on the whole process of divorce. And for those that haven't gone through the process, I think you're able to still take away the lesson about family still being with you, even in traditional, stable nuclear families.
Yeah. Wise words to end out on. So I want to thank Rohit for joining me tonight. But I also want to thank you, dearies. I want to thank Code Geass Anime Fan. I want to thank Little Blue. I want to thank Jacob for running things behind the scenes. I want to thank Richard's victims. And I could have sworn there might have been one other. I guess that's it. All right, thank you, folks. Anyone's going to turn in after this? Happy anniversary, Mrs. Doubtfire. We all love you, and good night.
Hello,
Goodbye, dearies.
dear